What you looking at me like that for? What, man? Come on, you just drove down here? Yeah. Who is you, Sharon? For a long time, try not to remember. Try to forget all those times. At some point, you gotta decide for yourself who you gonna be. Can't let nobody make that decision for you.
You gonna tell him why the other boys kick his ass all the time? What's wrong?
I'm good.
No, I done seen good, and you ain't it.
Remember the last time I saw you?
You're my only. I'm your only. No, you gon' listen.
To who, Ma? Huh? To you? Who is you, man? I ain't seen you in like a decade. It's not what I expected. What did you expect?
I recently sat down for a conversation with writer-director Barry Jenkins to talk about his extraordinary new film, Moonlight. The film tells the story of a largely underrepresented section of society, queer African-American males. In this interview, we discuss the film, what it means to be an active ally, his cinematic influences, and his incredible ensemble cast. Barry, thanks so much for sitting down with me today, and welcome back to the Bay Area.
Yeah, I know. It's my pleasure to be here.
Awesome. I'm just going to lay my cards out on the table. Mm-hmm. I love Moonlight.
Awesome.
I stand for it really, really hard.
I'll take those cards.
It's fantastic.
Thanks, man.
Today's October 11th, which is National Coming Out Day, and
That's right.
I couldn't think of a more appropriate time to talk about this movie and how vital it is for such an underrepresented part of society. Being that this is your first movie in 8 years, too, what drew you to this project and got you with Tarell?
Yeah, part of it was that I hadn't made a movie in so long, and I think, thinking back on it, because I've been talking about this for a lot, I think the reason some of the things I'd worked on over this started, I guess, 3.5 years ago. So at that point, it had been 5 years, and those things I've been working on weren't personal enough, And so when I read Tarell's play, which came to me with the description, this isn't about you, but it's about you. And when I read it, I kind of understood what that meant. And then I kind of did a trick on myself. I thought because the movie was so personal to Tarell and so biographical to Tarell that I could sort of hide behind him and slip in all my personal shit. But then over the course of these 3 years of making it, I realized very slowly, not quickly, that oh shit, no, there's so much of you that you're putting into this film. So yeah, it just grabbed me.
That's nice. How did it get in the hands of Plan B and then A24? Because they are really like the indie studio right now.
Yeah, so I had made Medicine in 2008. I had a few meetings with Plan B. Nothing really came of it. And then in 2013, I believe it was, I wrote the first draft of this in Brussels, Belgium. And I flew right from Brussels to Telluride because I've done the Telluride Film Festival for the last 14 years. And, I'm pretty high up at Telluride, but I don't know everything. And so I had no idea that 12 Years a Slave was world premiering there until like the morning of. And they told me, hey, you're going to do the introduction for the world premiere of 12 Years a Slave and the Q&A. And it went really well. And coming off the stage, I reconnected with Plan B. And they were like, hey, what are you working on? I was like, well, I just adapted this play by Tarell McCraney, and Plan B, they love termite art. They just know everybody and every piece of woodwork was doing something, so they knew who Tarell was, and we just kept in touch. And myself and the producer De La Romansky were working on the script, and then when it was to a good place, we got it to Plan B. They loved it, and right away they got it to A24. And I have to say, A24 didn't finance films before Moonlight, and I think they were just so passionate about it. They literally created a lane, to facilitate the making of this film.
That's fantastic. One of the things I mentioned in the beginning of my review is that I go into movies, like anybody else, to be entertained, but I also really want to sometimes absorb a part of life that I'm not familiar with to give me, more to work with. And I think on the topic of that, I also look for representation. There's a lot of conversation around who should be making certain types of movies and be in certain types of movies. That a woman needs to direct Wonder Woman and an African American needs to direct Black Panther. And I'm really curious kind of where you fall on that. And I mean, especially with this, because you kind of have your foot in one side and not in another. And
yeah, it's interesting. I approach this film from the place of empathy, as an ally, And I think there's ways to be a passive ally, ways to be an active ally. And I think about when the Supreme Court bill was passed and everybody changed their Facebook photos to the rainbow overlay, That's great, but to me that was passive, it wasn't active. And so when I read Tarell's piece, and I'm straight, just to get that out of the way, and Tarell's sexuality is very prevalent in his work. It's like a key component of most of his work, and particularly in the identity of this character. It was sort of like the foundation. And at first I thought, can this be your second film? Because it's just such a radical departure from the first film. And the things we're dealing with are, in some ways challenging, and maybe taboo. But I felt like it would be a cowardly act to not sort of like become a better man and undertake these things. And I also felt like if I could preserve Tarell's voice, which was at the foundation, the core of the piece, and get his blessing, that to pair that with this active sort of empathy, that I could find a way to very authentically put it in my voice and actually take authorship of it. And once I got to that place, I felt very comfortable, as an ally, being someone who couldn't 100% identify with the character, but I could really 90% identify with the character. And the 10% that I couldn't, I made damn sure that I kept Tarell's voice, because to me that was the bedrock of the piece. And so it's difficult because, we've seen people who try to approach things purely from a place of empathy, and they get it wrong, because you need that thing that's got to have a little fire on it, like a passion. But I think on this one, because I worked so closely with Tarell in the beginning, I felt comfortable doing it.
Were there any significant changes between his original work and
the biggest change was the structure. His play is non-linear. It jumps back and forth through time amongst all the characters. The way he describes it is he was telling a day in the life, but it would be like you would see Little wake up, then you would see Sharon wake up, then you would see Black wake up. Then you would see Little go to school, you would see Sharon go to school, you would see Black go to the corner.
Yes.
Things like that. And so my first choice was to take the structure and make it very simple. You're going to tell one story, second story, third story. Partly because of this film I saw by Ho Shao Shen called 3 Times, which I thought was very, very effective at contextualizing a relationship, by just setting it in 3 different periods. So I thought, if we kind of did this, I think structurally it could work. The other thing, the only big departure was, I don't know if it was because the story was so personal for Tarell, but he kind of stopped. So that the play kind of ends with these phone calls in the third story. Kevin calls Black, and Paula calls Black, but it didn't go further. And I thought, these phone calls are so rich. We have to see how these phone calls affect this character, whether he's going to act or not act. And so that was where the biggest, not departure, but I'd say extension of the work was.
That's great, because the diner scenes have just some of the greatest feeling.
Yeah, I think that what Tarell did was, and I described this last night at the Q&A, we're building all this story, we're building this world, we're building this character, we're seeing how the world is shaping him, both for, I want to say for good and for ill. I want to say purely for ill. He's fortifying himself, building all these barriers. And then I wanted to get to a place where we could just, as you said, feel this guy start to decide if he's going to stay buried within himself, or if he's going to let himself be drawn out, you know. And when you have somebody like Holland, who's like the most charming motherfucker in the world, you know, you are going to you're gonna have to make a choice, you know. Either I'm gonna come out, you know, or I'm gonna just be buried forever, you know. And so it was one of those really cool things where we could reorient the audience. 2 longest shots in the film, you know, he pulls up, taking his shirt off, he's walking, doorbell rings, then we're drifting, and then we have those close-ups, and now we're in a different film. Now the end game is set, and we're just going to watch in real time these 2 men reconnect, embrace. We're going to watch a black man cook for another black man, which I don't think I've ever seen in a film, you know. You know, we sort of hopefully create and earn the space to do that in those last 20-25 minutes.
That's you mentioned the Ho Xiao Shan, and I was really, that led right into what I was going to ask next, and if there were other directorial influences that kind of affected you. I had some ideas of what it was evoking in me.
You know, the 3 biggest are for sure Ho Xiao Shan 3 times, Claire Denis, Beau Travail, and then Wong Kar-wai, Happy Together, who we give like, I love you. I mean, we give the most like overt shout out that we possibly could. But to me, the idea was, you know, Happy Together is this amazing, phenomenal film about these Chinese men who are living in Argentina, and here I have a movie about these 2 black men from inner city Miami, and I just wanted to show, despite these 2 stories being worlds apart, you know, we're all human, and they're so damn close and relatable. And so for 30 seconds, you know, we hand the movie over to the master, you know. And then we do this very hard cut where now we're back at this trap music, you know, when he first pulls up at the diner. So that was perfect. I was the 2 directors I was thinking of were Tai Zhou and Wong Kar-wai, and I was just so impressed that you could feel the influence of them, yet what you're watching is so uniquely American. Well, because the idea is the movie is rooted in place, rooted in character. You know, James, the cinematographer, and I say, you know, it's not neorealism, you know, it's not misrealism. You know, we're gonna have a visual style that is rooted in character, and so when Chiron is feeling disoriented, the audience is gonna feel disoriented. You know, when Chiron is feeling displaced, you know, the audience is gonna feel displaced. And with Miami being so key to both Tarell's work and my upbringing, I just felt like going there and rooting the camera and the characters, rooting the sound and the characters, that we were going to end up with something that was, as you said, distinctly Moonlight, you know, despite what I feel are some pretty influential influences, you know. I like to say your influences don't necessarily become your aesthetic, you know.
Absolutely. It's impossible not to talk about this movie and not talk about this amazing ensemble. And something that's really, I thought, unique about this ensemble is not that this isn't, you know, a Robert Altman type ensemble where everybody interacts. This is a large group where it's mainly lots of one-on-one. It's only 2 characters in certain parts of the story at a time. Was that easier or more difficult? And third stories entirely.
The third story is pretty much entirely like Andre and Trevante, you know, and Naomie's the only one who basically goes through all 3 stories and gets to interact with all our protagonists. It was more challenging, but only in an emotional sense. You know, we had these like theater troupes almost, where we work for 7 or 8 days. I get used to working with little, and then we have like these 7 or 8 days. I get used to working with little. And then we'd have to switch, and now I'm working with these teenagers, and it's like I have to create a whole new language, you know. And then we'd have to switch again when Trevante and Andre showed up. So it was only challenging in that, you know, everybody showed up really passionate. I mean, nobody made any money on this film, so everybody really cared about the material, and you could feel that, and you get to a point where it's like, oh shit, we're a family. And now part of the family has gone off, you know, and then a new family would come in, and you'd have to like get your bearings again. So. It was in that sense, but because everybody was so diligent and really did their work, everybody showed up prepared, it felt like we were all making the same thing. That's why now when we go out on the road, it's like summer camp. I mean, it is amazing. Like everybody really gets along, and now I can see, because, you know, Trevante, Ashton, and Alex didn't meet during production. I never allowed them to meet. There was no rehearsal because I didn't want them to mimic one another. And now you see them, and they feel like brothers. You know, they'll be out on the road and they like all really, really love one another. So yeah, I'm kind of glad people refer to it as an ensemble, because I think everybody contributed to the piece in a very unique way that if you take one part out, it would all fall apart. Despite the fact that we're not all 8 actors like in a room sort of like doing these big blustery scenes together.
Absolutely. I was really impressed when I had read Naomie Harris did all of hers in 3 days, and not even like, here's day 1, part 1, day 2. That's crazy.
You know, it was because it was kind of a blessing in a certain way. By the time she got there, we were so well oiled, up and running. You know, Alex had been at that point, you know, he had never acted before. Now he's got like 10 days under his belt. You know,
I'm obsessed with that kid. He might be my favorite part.
He's so good. And then Naomie came in, and because we had an issue with her visa, was the only reason why her work got sandwiched like that. So it wasn't by choice, it was by necessity. And the first thing we shot with her was in the second story in the courtyard. And I remember, you know, here's this woman, she just came from Mexico City off the Bond junket or something like that. And we do that scene. And I remember saying to her, would you mind doing a take where you look right into the camera? Didn't prepare her for it. Total surprise. Just sprung it on her. And she was like, yeah, of course. I did it all the time with Danny, or 28 days later. And so we do the scene. And I only wanted this one line, but I'm your mama, ain't I? Because as they were doing the scene, I started to see myself in Ashton. I saw this moment he was having with Naomie. I saw myself having it with my mom. And I remember seeing her for the first time and realizing she was a different person. So I wanted the audience to know what that was like. So it's like, I want you to look right into the camera. So she does it. I think I'm only going to use it for this one line, but then she keeps going. And James, the cameraman, who I've known for 15 years, you know, he did my student films, he keeps going. So she's walking away and he's following her. And I was like, oh, we got a movie. and then we started doing it more and more. And yeah, she jumped all over. It was location dependent, not story dependent.
Yeah, that's what she said. It was really impressive.
I mean, I give her all the credit in the world, because what she did was incredibly difficult. But she did it, you know? But she did it.
I know it's very traditional to, you know, ask what you're doing next and talk about that. I looked on IMDb and saw that you had something, but I wanted to do something entirely different instead, and pitch something to you. And here it is. It's Andre Holland. Prince biopic.
I know. You know, it's funny. Ash Clark, this critic in the UK, said the same thing to me as Andre was walking by.
Nice.
And now every time I see him, I was like, Prince. I'm like, what? Because, you know, I didn't see it at first, but he does kind of look like him. He
has the right swagger. He has the charm.
Well, I'll tell you, Andre Holland can do anything. He's just so good. You know, when I think about this film, the 2 things I'm proudest of, and I didn't do them, so I can be proud of them in a very overtly open way, are the performances and the cinematography. Because I think in both cases, those people just, you know, I pushed them. And every time I pushed, they just went further and further, you know?
That's absolutely true. I totally agree. Barry, thank you so much for joining me today. Really, really appreciate it. And everybody needs to see this movie. It opens October 21st. Find it. Find it. Oh, much thanks, man. Thank you.
Cool.